My name is Jason Acosta. I am a social worker, an educator, an advocate, and an adjunct professor. A lot of times for me, what I often think about is the role of identity in education. Growing up, I've always asked the question, who am I? And it's a question I always go back to so that I know that I'm always trying to learn more and more about who I am, unpacking but staying true to who I really am at the core of this work. And so if you can take a second to imagine what it would feel like to having lost a part of who you are, because you had to move around from family to family, learn different cultures, adapt to different environments, adapt to different school systems, and completely change your life at a moment's notice. That's my story. I spent 18 years in foster care, and most of my childhood, I grew up with one particular family who had their own culture, their own rules, their own values. And the other half of my life, I grew up with another family who had their own culture, set of culture, norms, values, etc. And here I am in the middle trying to figure out who am I and where do I fit into all of this in the midst of growing up in the South Bronx. And so I spent so many years trying to figure out who I was as a Latino male in the South Bronx because of many of the inequities that I saw, because I would walk through metal detectors every day in school, saw police officers every day after school, and all of this, which is essentially trauma, became normalized in my life. And because of all of these things that I've experienced, I decided to follow a path of social work because what social work did for me was make me answer the questions that I had growing up. And it helped me to ultimately understand that many of the inequities that I experienced throughout life were intentionally created. And they were created through policies, they were created through traditions, they were created through cultural practices that were often led by dominant culture. And so how does that affect me when I am moving through school systems? How does that affect me as I enter my career? And how does that impact me so much so that I sometimes start to forget who I am through the midst of all of this and start to lose little parts of my identity and who I am, right? And so unless you make this intentional decision to study you and study your environment and study the young people in front of you, you will continue to move through dominant culture and adapt some of those values. And so fast forward, a lot of my work today really forces me to think about how we got to the many inequities that we're in and how education has played a role in pushing upon us a dominant culture with Eurocentric values and practices, etc. And so how do we start to dismantle that while also understanding who we are? And for me, that means who am I as a Latino male and what are my many identity markers? And what does that mean in relation to the young people in front of me? So I think this is at the core of the work that I do and the core of the work that is education and social work. I think it's really important for us to take a second to think about cultural competence. Who are the people that we're serving? Who are the people that we're influencing? Who are the people that we're impacting? What is their culture? What are their traditions? What do they enjoy? And how do we challenge ourselves to continue to ask the question, who am I? And so as you are able to understand who you are, your identities, etc., you then have a better chance of understanding the young people in front of you. Because if you don't know who you are, you won't know who the young people are in front of you that you're working with and impacting every day.